let me begin again. Every moment is a new beginning. Dear Sigrid Hackenberg. And let me begin by thanking you all for having listened to me with a great deal of patience. So I will wind up, and I'll try to wind up as quickly as I can. So we can have this conversation. Ideas that I have been interested in sharing with you. Now to see the significance of Fidel Castro in our times, let me return to the poem of Che Guevara I cited earlier. Che's lines evidently underline some of Castro's own agendas, activist agendas. But one of the foremost agendas for Fidel, again, I'm very conscious of this. In solidarity with this. But still, Castro, old habits die hard. But one of the foremost agendas for Fidel was clearly Reforma Agraria, or agrarian land reform, reminding us, by us I mean some of us in those parts of the world, of the famous slogan, land first, talk later, that emerged from the heart of some indigenous movements on the Caribbean, and also from anti-colonial movements in Asia and Africa, a slogan that very interestingly the Native American writer-activist Leslie Marmon Silko captures so well in her epic novel, Almanac of the Dead. Indeed, as Fidel has suggested on more occasions than one, no revolution in Cuba, or for that matter, no mass movements in many parts of Latin America, Asia, and Africa can bypass the land question and thus the peasant question itself. After 1959, Cuba quickly turned out to be, for us in the Third World, turned out to be an internationally exemplary site of land reform. The poor peasants in particular experienced and acknowledged a hitherto unknown radical reconfiguration of the political economy in the entire history of Cuba. It is not for nothing then that the Nicaraguan Marxist poet, priest, liberation theologian Ernesto Cardenal characterized Fidel as a genuine leader and a comrade of peasants. So did the Latin American novelist Gabriel Garcia Marquez, an ardent admirer of Fidel Castro. Now, I have to make a crucial point, otherwise ignored by Western Marxists. Today's unprecedented capitalist urbanization notwithstanding, peasants have not at all disappeared from the stage of history. Under global capitalism itself, peasants still continue to constitute the actual masses in many, if not all, parts of Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And their primary, if not the only concern, primary concern has historically been land or landlessness. Thus, for immediate but crucial political, economic reasons, the land question already directly preoccupied a whole host of Tri-Continental revolutionaries, from, say, the Chinese Communist revolutionary Mao Zedong and the Vietnamese anti-colonial freedom fighter Ho Chi Minh, to such African socialists as Amilcar Cabral and Kwame Nkrumah, to Fidel and Che themselves. And the land question also inflected and informed Marxism-Leninism in ways in which it was possible, rather absolutely necessary, to posit a relatively new revolutionary agent of change in history other than the urban proletariat in the classical Marxist sense of the term. And that new agent was the peasant, to quote Mao. And here again is the relevance of Mao Zedong, who used an extended Lenin vis-a-vis the peasant question. Now, Fidel Castro, actively concerned as he was with the peasant question, can certainly be located within this tradition of those revolutionaries who have decisively contributed to what might be called the third worldization of Marxism as such. The third worldization of Marxism. Marxism has been third worldized. And those re-Marxianizing Marxist revolutionaries, say, even from Maria Teguer of Peru, from Maria Teguer to Mao, from Cabral to Castro, here I'm using Castro for the sake of illustration, from Cabral to Castro, keep making the points that Marxism is not just a Eurocentric or metropolitan phenomenon as such, and that thus to argue that Marxism is Eurocentric as some post-all, I call it post-all, or postmodern, post-structuralist, post-colonial, and even post-Marxist theorists already did in the metropolis, is to fall into the trap of an utterly shoddy Eurocentrism itself. For the very argument that Marxism is Eurocentric violently erases the actual life and death histories, macro and micro, of Marxism being creatively applied to and even transformed by the deep specificities of certain sites and subjects in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, for instance. And indeed, to speak of Castro is to speak all at once of Cuba, the Cuban Revolution, and the Cubanization of Marxism-Leninism, interconnected as they all are, that together continue to take up the challenge of not only responding to the crisis of our contemporary conjuncture as such, but also braving US imperialism at every turn and even overturning capitalism itself. In fact, the question of US imperialism is acutely relevant to our understanding of the historically and politically significant role of Fidel Castro. He is an exemplarily uncompromising and committed anti-imperial figure of our times, a decisively Cuban communist and an internationalist, one who has combined the late 19th century Cuban revolutionary Jose Marti's unflagging revolutionary fervor with the Peruvian Marxist Jose Carlos Maria Tegui's Leninist penchant for the concrete, for the daily, for the detailed. And Fidel Castro has been alive and alert in a number of instructive and even inspirational ways. Given his long and inordinately eventful career, it is possible to relate. It is impossible to relate. It is impossible to relate and evaluate all aspects of his work, his life, and his contributions within the relatively brief space, I say relatively brief space of my talk, this relatively brief time. What, however, I intend to do is first to underline a particularly famous and still relevant characterization of Fidel Castro that has come from none other than Che Guevara himself, and then spell out a few theoretical political propositions, tentative as they are, emanating as they do from Castro's own constellations of activities, underlining their relevance to our struggle against capitalism and imperialism today. Now here is Che Guevara on Fidel Castro. He, meaning Fidel Castro, I quote Che, he has the qualities of a great leader, added to which are his personal gifts of audacity, strength, courage. And these have brought him the position of honor and sacrifice that he occupies today. But he has other important qualities. His ability to assimilate knowledge and experience in order to understand a situation in its entirety without losing sight of the details, his unbounded faith in the future, and the breadth of his vision to foresee events and anticipate them in action, always seeing further and more accurately than his compatriots. With these great cardinal qualities, his capacity to unite, resisting the divisions that weaken, his ability to lead the whole people in action, his infinite love for the people, his faith in the future, and with his capacity to foresee it, Fidel Castro has done more than anyone in Cuba to create from nothing the present formidable apparatus of the Cuban Revolution, unquote. And that was Che Guevara on Fidel Castro. Not me, Che Guevara. I'm not humanity. What then can you keep learning from Fidel at a time when capitalism, imperialism, sometimes in the form of recolonization, witnessed Bangladesh, racism, patriarchy, and other forms of oppression and domination, as you have rightly pointed out, that there are oppressions, in the family, in the spaces of family, in some microsites, and I don't undermine the importance of microsites. And today there is this term that has come to the fore. It's microaggression. So yes, microaggressions, microaggressions, of course, other forms of oppression and domination have been more profoundly and intricately interconnected than before. One can go on and on, citing numerous lessons from Fidel's own life experiences, his world of activities, and from hundreds of speeches he already delivered with superb energy. But let me categorically and quickly focus on a few relatively distinct yet interconnected areas relating to Fidel's what? Once again emphasized by a whole host of South Asian Marxist revolutionaries. I should quote Lenin here a little bit, lest I get misunderstood. Knowledge, as Lenin said once, knowledge, there is no such thing as pure knowledge. Knowledge is always mediated. So lenses have, there are lenses that are at work. Knowledge is always mediated and always incomplete. Hence, the struggle for completing knowledge. I find that very important. Another statement I want to make, and it comes from Antonio Gramsci. He says that what you say and what you do not say, what you include and what you do not include, what you emphasize and what you do not emphasize, what you reveal and what you do not, and what you conceive, are never politically and ideologically neutral or innocent. So I have kept those things in mind also. So first, as Castro teaches us, revolution means a fundamental break with a given mode of production in order to inaugurate a new one, as well as inaugurate new epistemic cultural modes of production and exchange in the interest of the total emancipation of humankind. And revolution is not a product, but a process that calls for continuously creative and critical interventions. As Fidel puts it in his On Imperialist Globalization, he has a piece called On Imperialist Globalization, one that I read in English translation. Fidel said, put it this way, this is a great statement, one line, but he's a master of one-liners too, Fidel. Marcos, master of one-liners. So he said, we, the revolutionaries, have discovered an even more powerful weapon. Human beings can think and feel, unquote. That's another powerful one. Think and feel. And these feelings, it brings up the question of the spiritual revolution, and Martin Luther King here becomes a relevant figure, I would argue, and liberation theology, Martin Luther King, and I can't but, cite a conversation between Ernesto Cardenal and Fidel Castro. So Ernesto Cardenal and Fidel Castro got into this car here in Havana and moving. But Ernesto Cardenal didn't get his appointment immediately and so on, but Fidel wanted to see him, okay, so he ended up, he said that, hey, be outside the hotel, and there's Hotel Nacional there, outside. So yes, and then I will bring my car, he will get with this car, and then we will move. I have to take care of some certain things, and then we'll talk. So that will be it. He said, yes, of course. And then Ernesto Cardenal, with a great deal of zeal, got into Fidel Castro's car, and they started talking about a number of things, and the religious question came out. The question of religion came out. Question of religion came up, and then at one point, Ernesto Cardenal, of course, he said that, hey, I'm worried about this question of religion. Revolution is great, but how we are going to address the question of religion, how we are going to include Christians and so on and so forth, this kind of conversation. At one point, Ernesto Cardenal said, hey, you see, Marxism is a science, and then religion, it has to do with faith. So science and faith. The moment Ernesto Cardenal said that, Fidel interrupted the poet and said, look, Marxism is also a philosophy, and religion, of course, is faith. Fidel Castro, and then he said, you know something? Dialectical materialism is more spiritual than positive. So he just said a number of things, just by saying this. So that's the question of spiritual revolution. The second point, the unity and conviction and commitment of the masses can make a relatively small geographical territory powerful and even invincible vis-a-vis an antagonistic superpower. It is not for nothing that Fidel could say with utmost confidence, we have come here to stay and we do not fear Yankee imperialism. Yes, we have come here to stay, and Cuba stays. Third, as Fidel teaches us, leadership is not a noun, but a verb. One that continuously needs to derive its energy and inspiration from a thorough knowledge of and undiminished commitment to specific subjects and sites, dialectically capturing the specific within the general and the general within the specific. Fourth, US imperialism is simultaneously most aggressive, most naked, and most crisis-ridden at this conjuncture, where the people in the third world are way more vocal against the US imperialism than before. And the fundamental sites of both imperialist aggression and opposition to that aggression are Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Thus the national colonial question returns with a vengeance. And national liberation then comes to mean people's liberation from both the exploitative but plundering national ruling classes as well as from imperialism itself, organically tied as they are. And in this instance, of course, the primary and secondary contradictions as well as the various shifting aspects would depend on a given calculus of historical material contradictions operating and obtaining within a given society. Fifth, there is no alternative to building a national liberation movement, as well as a Tri-Continentalist movement against capitalism and imperialism. Che and Fidel learned from one another regarding what Che called Tri-Continentalism. Sixth, Fidel himself teaches us that a leader, no matter how powerful and knowledgeable he or she is not a superhuman, but an imperfect, vulnerable, mortal being, as certainly Castro was, Fidel was. Our struggle, therefore, is to be directed against, among other things, all imperfections and against romanticizing or fetishizing a few individuals as the only protagonists of history, as opposed to the masses who themselves change and create a history, thereby remaining the protagonists of history. And this is Mao's point, too, that the people themselves are the decisive force. They create history, they change history. So, let's not fetishize only a few individuals. That doesn't mean that we should throw away this idea of leadership and so on and so forth. So because the leadership is not just a matter of being a singular individual. Leadership is a matter of, remaining organically tied to the people. So leadership is the people. That's the notion that also came from Antonio Gramsci. Antonio Gramsci made a distinction between traditional intellectuals and organic intellectuals. Made a distinction between traditional leadership and organic leadership. And that organic leadership has to do with the fact that the leader ceases to be an individual as such, a singular figure as such, and becomes the people, and the people become this leader. That's organic leadership. So that. 7. Marxism-Leninism is not to be fixed and frozen in time and space, but to be reinvented. To be reinvented at every turn in response to the specific pressures and rhythms of specific conjunctures, moments, histories, and spaces. Let me now close my talk with a few lines Che Guevara wrote in his last letter sent to his children. And Che Guevara said, "If imperialism is finished, you coming home, and I will take a vacation on the moon." I'm talking. While Che Guevara was killed, Fidel Castro had never been on a vacation. No, the struggle doesn't end, but only begins anew. I stop there. Thank you.